My name is Amée Dubois. I'm 32 years old, an interior designer living in Lyon, France. A city that looks like it was built for love stories. From the balcony of our apartment overlooking the Rhône River, I used to watch the water glimmer at sunset and think to myself, this is happiness. My husband, Julien Moreau, was everything a woman could wish for. Steady, kind, ambitious. A software engineer with quiet eyes and a smile that could soften any hard day. We had been married for 7 years. Together we built a home filled with soft colors, art books, and Sunday laughter. I thought we were unbreakable. My dream was simple, to become a mother. For years that dream painted every corner of my life. The white crib stored in the guest room, the tiny baby blankets I started knitting, the list of names we whispered in bed. But reality kept shattering that dream. I had 4 miscarriages, 4 small heartbreaks that arrived silently, each one stealing a piece of me. I gave them names: Éloïse, Théo, Lila, and Rémi. It made the loss feel less invisible. Julien always said, "We'll try again," and I believed him. I believed everything he said. Looking back, it feels strange how perfect everything seemed, how clean, how quiet, how safe before the first crack appeared. If only I had known that behind those tender smiles and reassuring words, something much darker was already blooming in the shadows of our home. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. It was an ordinary October afternoon, gray light spilling through the kitchen window, the air heavy with the scent of rain. I was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through fertility clinic websites in Paris, comparing success rates and costs. The cursor blinked next to the phrase IVF package options, and for a moment I imagined what hope might feel like again. Julien had left early for work that morning, leaving his usual coffee cup in the sink. I remember thinking I'd wash it later, the same way I thought we would try again later. Later had become my whole life. A promise that never arrived. The apartment door opened behind me. I assumed Julien had forgotten something, but instead it was Lucas Garnier, his best friend since college, a gentle, reliable man with kind brown eyes. He worked as a veterinarian, often visiting us to drop off leftover pastries from the clinic staff. "Salad, Amée," he greeted, hanging his coat. "Julien asked me to return this," he said, waving a small toolbox. He walked toward the kitchen, and I turned back to my laptop. A few seconds later I heard a pause, the kind that stretches just a bit too long to be casual. When I looked up, Lucas was standing by the counter, holding a small orange pill bottle in his hand. His brows furrowed. "Amée," he said slowly, the confusion in his voice pulling me upright. "I thought you and Julien were trying to have a baby. Why do you have mifepristone here?" The name didn't register at first. It sounded clinical, meaningless. "Mif what?" I asked, trying to recall if it was one of the hormone pills I had been prescribed. He turned the bottle slightly under the light. "It's an abortion drug," he said softly. "It ends a pregnancy." I froze. Every sound in the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the drizzle tapping against the window, seemed to vanish. I laughed, a thin, nervous laugh that didn't belong to me. "That must be a mistake. I don't even know what that is." Lucas looked at me carefully. "It's prescribed. There's a name on the label." I stood, my knees unsteady. "Julien," I called out, though I already knew he wasn't home. "This must be, I don't know, maybe something for his mother? She takes a lot of medication." Lucas didn't answer. He read the label again, his face tightening. "It's under Julien Moreau. Prescribed just last month." The room started spinning, slow, deliberate, like a carousel winding down. "That can't be right," I whispered. "There must be a mix-up." Lucas looked uneasy, torn between saying something and staying silent. "Maybe you should talk to him," he said finally. When Julien came home an hour later, I was still standing in the kitchen, the bottle on the counter between us like a ticking bomb. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was calm, too calm, that dangerous kind of calm that comes just before a storm. Julian's smile faltered. Where did you get that? Lucas found it. He thought I should ask you. His eyes darted from me to the bottle. His hand twitched slightly, as if deciding whether to reach for it or not. It's not what you think, Amy. My chest tightened. Then what is it? Because Lucas says it's an abortion drug, and it has your name on it. He didn't answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it echo in my ears. Julian, please, I said, my voice cracking. Tell me you're not. Tell me this isn't. Still nothing. Lucas stepped forward, breaking the unbearable quiet. Julian, he said gently, the label shows 2 prescriptions, one from August, another from September. Why would you have that in your house? Julian swallowed hard. His face turned the color of ash. The world around me began to blur, sounds blending into a dull ringing. 2 prescriptions? I repeated, my throat dry. You mean he's been buying this for months? Lucas nodded slowly. My hands began to tremble. I stared at Julian, waiting for him to laugh, to explain, to say it's a misunderstanding. But he didn't. He just stood there, frozen, guilty, small. A memory flashed. The metallic taste in my mouth after morning smoothies, the cramps that always came just before each miscarriage, how he'd comforted me afterward, whispering, "It's not your fault, mon amour." It all crashed together, the timing, the symptoms, the endless failures. Julian, I whispered, barely breathing, did you do something to me? He stepped back, eyes wide. It's not what you think. I cut him off. 4 times, Julian. For babies. For funerals I had to hold in my heart. Did you kill them? Tears blurred my vision. My body felt foreign, trembling uncontrollably. He pressed his palms against the counter, jaw clenched. You don't understand. No, you're right, I said, my voice rising, breaking. I don't understand how the man who kissed me goodnight, who held me through every loss, could be the same man who caused them. I backed away, bumping into the table. The laptop slid off, crashing to the floor. Lucas moved forward, reaching out, but I waved him off. I needed air. I needed space. My mind replayed every scene I'd thought was love. Him making me smoothies before work. Him insisting on brewing my coffee. Him holding my hand in the hospital after every miscarriage. Every gesture of care now twisted into an act of cruelty. I turned toward Lucas, voice barely audible. He's been poisoning me, hasn't he? Lucas didn't answer, but the look on his face was enough. Julian tried to step closer, his voice trembling. Amy, please. I didn't mean. Don't. I snapped, my voice shaking with rage. Don't you dare say you didn't mean it. You meant something. What was it? Money. Freedom. Camille. The name slipped out before I even realized it. A name I'd only heard once, mentioned as a colleague. Julian froze. Lucas's eyes widened. Camille? He asked quietly. Julian, what does she have to do with this? Julian opened his mouth but said nothing. His silence was louder than any confession. I felt my knees give way, my body collapsing into the chair. I covered my mouth, trying to hold in the sob that broke free anyway. For times, I whispered again. You let me believe it was my fault. You watched me blame myself. The air between us was electric with horror. Lucas, pale and shaken, gently set the pill bottle back on the counter. You need to call the police, he said quietly. I didn't answer. I just stared at the label, mifepristone, 200 milligrams. Prescription, Julien Moreau. The letters blurred through my tears. That was the moment everything inside me cracked open. Not just the trust, not just the marriage, but the very foundation of who I was. The home that once smelled of lavender candles and fresh bread now reeked of betrayal. And the man I had loved more than my own heartbeat was suddenly a stranger, one capable of unthinkable cruelty. The truth was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was standing right in front of me, silent, ashamed, and human. And somehow that made it even more terrifying. I don't remember the exact moment when my scream began. Only the sound of my own voice echoing off the walls, raw and feral, like something breaking open inside me. How could you? I shouted, every syllable shaking. I gave up everything for us, Julian. My work, my body, my peace. All for you, for the family you said you wanted. He stood motionless, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. His silence infuriated me even more. I endured injections, hormones, hospital nights. I bled and prayed and blamed myself while you— My voice cracked. You were poisoning our children before they were even born? Julian's eyes flickered with something. Guilt, fear, maybe both, but he still said nothing. Say something, I demanded, slamming my hand on the table. Look at me. He finally did. And in his eyes I saw a terrifying emptiness. A man who had already made peace with his choices. Lucas, still standing by the doorway, finally broke the silence. His voice trembled. Julian, was it because of Camille? The name sliced through the air like a blade. Julian's jaw clenched. He didn't answer, but his silence was louder than any admission. Lucas shook his head in disbelief. My God, you were seeing her while Amée was— while she was losing the babies. I stared at Julian, the realization settling in like poison. Tell me it's not true, I whispered. Please. He exhaled shakily. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? I snapped. How exactly do you justify killing our children? Explain it to me, Julian. I want to understand what kind of man I married. He took a step forward then stopped. You don't know what it was like. The pressure. The debt. The insurance. The what? I turned toward him sharply. Lucas frowned. What insurance? Julian hesitated, but it was too late. Lucas reached for his phone, lying face down on the counter. Let me see, he said. Don't touch that, Julian barked, lunging toward him, but Lucas was faster. He unlocked the phone with a thumbprint in one smooth motion. The screen lit up, a flurry of messages glowing in the dim kitchen light. And then the room fell silent again. I could see the reflection of the text in Lucas's widening eyes before he turned the screen toward me. Messages between Julien Moreau and Camille L. Camille. The policy's approved. Once it's medically confirmed, we can move forward. Julian, good. She won't suspect anything. She trusts me. Camille. You're sure about this? Julian, we need the money. It's the only way to build our future. Camille. And the babies? Julian, let them go. Their deaths will pay for the life we deserve. The world stopped. For a long moment there was no sound. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant rain, and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at him, at the man who had once traced constellations on my skin and whispered promises under the lion moonlight. Now all I saw was a stranger made of lies. You killed them, I said, my voice barely audible. Not because you didn't want to be a father, but because you wanted money. Julian tried to reach for me. Amée, listen. I stepped back, trembling. Don't you dare say my name. You don't deserve to speak it. Tears blurred my vision. You made me believe it was my fault. You watched me grieve and said nothing. You held me while I screamed for our babies, knowing you were the one who took them. Julian's face crumbled. I thought it would be temporary. I thought once we were stable. Stop, I shouted, slamming my hands against my ears. There is no version of this that makes it less monstrous. Lucas, pale and horrified, picked up his phone. I'm calling the police. Julian's eyes went wild. No, don't. Lucas, don't do this. You don't understand what you're doing. But Lucas had already dialed. You poisoned your wife, Julian. You murdered your unborn children. There's nothing to understand. Julian's breathing grew rapid. He looked around at the open door, the rain-soaked street beyond the window. His instincts kicked in before reason could stop him. He bolted. Julian! I screamed, reaching out, but he was already running through the back door, his footsteps fading into the night. Lucas moved to the door, shouting after him, but I collapsed to the floor. My body finally gave in to everything I had been holding back. Rage, grief, disbelief, nausea. My chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside. I gasped for air between sobs. This can't be real. This can't. Lucas knelt beside me. It's real, he whispered. But you're safe now, Amée. You're safe. I shook my head. Safe? He's out there. The man who shared my bed, who touched my body, he's a murderer. Minutes passed in blur. Sirens began to wail in the distance, faint at first, then closer. Blue lights flickered against the window pane, painting the walls in flashes of truth. 2 officers entered, calm but firm. Lucas explained everything, the pills, the messages, the escape. One of them collected the orange bottle with gloved hands, sealing it in a clear evidence bag. The other photographed Julien's phone. I sat on the floor, clutching my knees, unable to move. "Madame Dubois," one officer said gently, crouching beside me. "You're safe now. We'll find him." I didn't respond. My gaze was fixed on the counter. The empty cup Julien had used that morning. There was a lipstick stain on the rim. Mine. It felt obscene now that something so small, so intimate, could belong to the same day I discovered the truth. Lucas placed a blanket over my shoulders. "You're not alone, Amée," he whispered. His voice trembled too. "I promise you he'll face justice." But I didn't feel justice. I felt hollow. The apartment, once our refuge, now felt contaminated, every memory rewritten in darker ink. The framed photos on the wall mocked me. Our wedding in Nancy, our trip to Rome, his arms around me after our first miscarriage. Lies. All of it. The officers spoke quietly among themselves, then one returned. "We've sent a team to the train station and his office. We'll contact you if we locate him." Lucas nodded, but I barely heard. My world had shrunk to the sound of rain, the flash of lights, and the faint metallic rattle of the evidence bag being sealed. I pressed a shaking hand against my stomach, the place where life had once tried to bloom. And for the first time since the screaming started, I whispered almost to myself, "I'm sorry, my loves. I didn't know." Tears slid down my face. Lucas turned away, giving me the privacy of grief. Outside, thunder rolled over Lyon deep and low, echoing through the river valley like a final verdict. The storm had arrived, and nothing, not love, not forgiveness, not time, could ever undo what had been done. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked linen. I woke up to the sound of beeping machines and Lucas's exhausted face beside me. His eyes were red, his hand gripping mine tightly, as if afraid I might slip away too. "You fainted," he whispered. "You were barely breathing when the ambulance arrived. They said your blood pressure was collapsing." I blinked at the ceiling, its sterile whiteness blurring into the soft outline of a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Where is he?" "They haven't found him yet," Lucas said. "But the police are working non-stop." My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to tear out every 4 line in my arm, to run home and erase everything. But the truth was still there, waiting. Heavy, sharp, and inescapable. The next morning, 2 detectives entered my room. One placed a folder on the table. The other stood silently near the window, taking notes. "Madame Dubois," the first one began, "the investigation confirms you've been ingesting mifepristone and misoprostol compounds for nearly 2 years. In small, continuous doses." I froze. 2 years. He nodded. "We found residue in your coffee machine." The filter compartment had traces of the drug, carefully concealed under a thin layer of ground beans. There were also capsules hidden in your vitamin bottles. "We recovered video evidence from your kitchen camera." He turned his tablet toward me. I saw Julien, my husband, standing by the counter, shirt sleeves rolled up, pouring a white powder into the blender. Then he added strawberries, yogurt, and honey. I recognized that day instantly. It was the morning after my second miscarriage. He had brought me that smoothie in bed, saying, "You need your strength, my love." I pressed a trembling hand against my mouth. The memory twisted into something monstrous. Every sip, every tender gesture, all poisoned. Lucas turned away, his jaw clenched. The detective closed the folder gently. "We'll need to keep you for observation. The toxins are slow-acting, but we've started treatment. You're lucky your body resisted." Lucky. What a strange word for someone whose children were murdered by love. Over the next days, the investigation deepened. Forensics found traces of the drugs in multiple places. The sugar jar, the coffee beans, even the bottle of vitamin D Julien used to hand me every morning with a kiss. Each discovery felt like another stab, another betrayal unearthed. Lucas stayed at the hospital every night, sleeping on the chair by my bed. He brought me chamomile tea and read aloud from my favorite design magazines, trying to keep my mind from collapsing under the weight of it all. Once, I woke up to find him crying quietly, his hand still holding mine. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. There was nothing left to explain, only silence and the ruins of trust. The day of the arrest came with no warning, only a knock on the hospital door and the words, They found them. Julien and Camille were caught at a small train station outside Lyon, carrying 2 suitcases filled with cash, insurance documents, and fake passports. The news spread fast. Reporters camped outside the hospital, whispering my name like a curse wrapped in sympathy. During the interrogation, everything unfolded: the insurance fraud, the poison, the motive. They had taken out multiple life insurance policies under my name, and the pregnancies, falsifying medical documents with Camille's help. She worked at a private clinic. Every miscarriage meant a payout. Every death, a step closer to their new beginning. The police showed me the evidence: photos, letters, even printed messages. But nothing hit me harder than what came next. Detective Morel entered with a sealed evidence bag. Inside were 4 small baby blankets, soft pastels, hand-woven with care. My care. I had knitted them during the quiet nights when hope still lived in me. 1 pink, 1 blue, 1 yellow, 1 white. Each with a tiny tag stitched with initials: A, T, L, and R. My children's names. When I saw them inside that plastic bag tagged as evidence, something inside me cracked beyond repair. The detective spoke softly, almost apologetically. "We found these in a storage box at their apartment. We thought you'd want to know." I reached out but couldn't bring myself to touch the bag. The blankets looked too sacred to be confined by plastic and numbers. They were the last pieces of innocence I had. And even they had been turned into proof. Lucas caught me as my knees gave out. I clung to him, sobbing into his chest, the kind of cry that strips a soul bare. "It's over," he whispered. "He can't hurt you anymore." But I wasn't crying for myself. I was mourning the children I never got to hold, the home I thought I built on love, and the man who turned tenderness into a weapon. Months later, the trial began. Julien sat in the defendant's chair, gaunt, hollow-eyed, unshaven. Camille beside him, her once pristine face now hardened by fear. The prosecutor read the charges: premeditated poisoning, insurance fraud, criminal conspiracy, 4 counts of fetal homicide. Every word echoed like thunder in the courtroom. When they showed the video, Julien mixing the powder, smiling faintly as he hummed to himself, I looked away. I couldn't bear to watch love die twice. At the end, when the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the room erupted in murmurs. I sat still, hands clasped, tears silent. Justice had been served, but peace was still far away. Before leaving, one of the officers returned the sealed blankets to me. I asked if I could keep them. He nodded. That night, I placed them beside my hospital bed, whispering their names one last time. For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself to grieve, not as a victim but as a mother saying goodbye. And somewhere between the silence and the sorrow, I realized the truth didn't just destroy my world, it revealed who I truly was. A woman who had been broken but was still alive. Julien was found 3 months later in the outskirts of Brussels, unshaven, gaunt, and hiding in an old Peugeot that reeked of sweat and regret. When the police dragged him out, he didn't resist. He wept like a child who had finally realized the monster he'd become. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I attended every session. Some days I couldn't breathe. Others I sat stone-faced, staring at the man I once called my husband. He avoided my eyes, but I could feel the weight of his shame every time the prosecutor replayed the videos. His hands moving with routine calm as he stirred poison into my morning smoothie. Julien was sentenced to 7 years in prison for intentional poisoning, insurance fraud, and domestic violence. The court's decision felt cold and clinical, each word carved into marble, but my heart remained unhealed. Camille, who had cooperated with the investigation, received a suspended sentence. I remember her standing there, pale, trembling, whispering that she never meant for it to go that far. The judge ordered all shared assets to be returned to me: the apartment, the car, the savings account. Lawyers congratulated me. Reporters called it a victory for justice. But victory is a hollow word when your world has already been burned to ash. After the verdict, I returned to what was once our home on Rue de la Barre to collect my things. The apartment smelled like bleach and ghosts. I stood in the kitchen where it all happened, where he had smiled at me over morning coffee, where he had killed our children without lifting a blade. The cup I used every day still sat on the counter, chipped on one side. I touched it once, then dropped it into the trash. I packed a single suitcase: my design sketches, my grandmother's scarf, And the 4 small blankets that had once been evidence. They were no longer proof of a crime. They were the only proof of love I had left. As I locked the door behind me, Lyon felt quieter than ever. The wind from the Rhone was sharp and clean, carrying away what little was left of the woman who once believed in forever. Justice had been done. But justice doesn't warm your hands at night, and it doesn't fill the silence left by 4 unborn hearts. I walked away from that apartment without looking back. I told myself that whatever remained, guilt, rage, grief, would have to stay behind those walls. But grief is stubborn. It follows you like a shadow that refuses to fade, even under the brightest sun. I found a small apartment above a bakery in Croixraus, a place that smelled of coffee, fresh bread, and beginnings. The windows faced east, and each morning light spilled across the wooden floor like forgiveness. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I filled it with life. Ivy climbing up the balcony, candles in every corner, and a small shelf where I placed the 4 blankets. I spoke their names out loud sometimes, Éloïse, Théo, Lila, Rémi, not as ghosts but as promises that I would keep living for them. Lucas helped me move in. He never tried to fix me, he just existed beside me. Quietly, consistently. On Thursdays he'd bring pizza and bad jokes, the kind that made me roll my eyes and laugh despite myself. His presence reminded me that not all men destroy. Some rebuild slowly, patiently, 1 brick of kindness at a time. I joined a support group for survivors of domestic violence in Lyon. We met in a church basement that smelled of lavender and tea. Women from all walks of life sat in a circle, their voices trembling but strong. For the first time I said the words out loud. He poisoned me. No one looked away. No one pitied me. They just listened, and in their silence I felt seen. One weekend I planted 4 trees in the small garden behind the bakery. An apple tree for Éloïse, a maple for Rémi, a cherry blossom for Lila, and an oak for Théo. I painted their names on small stones and placed them beneath the roots. Each morning I watered them and whispered, "Grow strong for me." Seasons changed. Leaves fell and grew again. I watched the world heal itself inch by inch and realized that maybe I could too. Sometimes I still dream of Julien. Not as the man who hurt me, but as the illusion I once loved. I no longer hate him. Hatred requires energy I no longer wish to give. I only pity the emptiness he mistook for freedom. 1 year later I returned to work. My firm offered me a transfer to Geneva. A fresh start, surrounded by mountains instead of memories. I accepted. The day I left Lyon, I stopped by the garden one last time. The trees were taller now, their roots holding fast to the earth. I touched the bark of the oak and whispered, "We made it." In that moment I understood rebirth wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live beside it. Pain had carved me hollow, but in that hollow space new light began to grow. And for the first time in years, when the wind brushed against my face, I didn't flinch. I closed my eyes, inhaled the scent of blossoms and smiled. Not because I was healed, but because I had survived. For a long time I thought survival was something passive, something that simply happened to those who were lucky enough. But I've learned that survival is a choice, one you must make every single day, even when your body trembles and your heart doesn't want to wake up. When I look back, I realize that every moment I stayed alive was an act of rebellion. Julien tried to take away my motherhood, my trust, my sense of worth. Yet here I am, breathing, healing, living. Pain doesn't vanish like smoke. It transforms. It sits quietly inside you, reshaped by time and tenderness. I still remember the nights I woke up screaming, the mornings when silence felt heavier than grief itself. But pain, when accepted, becomes a teacher. It teaches you where you bleed and how to stop the wound from defining you. The day the trial ended, I went home and stood by my window. Outside, the light touched the leaves of the 4 young trees I had planted, one for each child I lost. I named them silently Lyon, Elise, Noah, and Claire. Their names were no longer carved in memory alone but rooted in the earth, reaching for the sky I once thought I'd never see again. Every morning I water them. I whisper stories they'll never hear, but I believe the earth listens. I tell them about strength, about forgiveness, about the quiet dignity of continuing. Sometimes Lucas joins me, handing me the watering can in silence. We don't need words. The ritual itself speaks for us. It says, life goes on even when it shouldn't have. There are still days I feel the ache, When laughter feels foreign and my reflection looks like someone I used to know. But then I see the trees, taller now, stronger, and I remember growth is not loud. Healing is not glamorous. It's the smallest decision repeated daily, to get up, to breathe, to believe again. If I could speak to the woman I was before all of this, I would tell her, you will not die from this. You will break, yes, but you will rebuild yourself differently, stronger, quieter, but never smaller. Because sometimes victory isn't about winning. It's about surviving the war and still choosing love. In the end, I've learned that forgiveness isn't about freeing the ones who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their darkness. I no longer wish for revenge. My peace is punishment enough for them. Julien destroyed my dream of motherhood, but he did not destroy me. I'm still here, breathing, living, and that is my victory. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for every woman who was made to believe her pain was her fault. Because sometimes surviving is the most powerful revenge.